Hello, this is James Steele with ESL 545 at Grand Canyon University. My professor is Dr. Trekera Taylor, and today's professional development course will be looking at Arizona's language development approach. Arizona's state-led initiative to better engage and enhance the learning experiences of English language learners is a multi-stepped and incorporated process. In the following presentation, we will look deeper into that process and cover things such as assessment, early identification, accommodations, student rights, and parent refusal. First, we must understand what ELL, or English Language Learners, are and who they are. According to the state of Arizona, ELL uses two common terms known as English Language Learner and students who are not proficient at the English language. This pertains to students from kindergarten through 12th grade, and also includes people or someone who is not proficient in writing, reading, or speaking the English language. According to the Arizona Department of Education, Arizona's demographics are almost centrally located in the Phoenix metropolitan area when it pertains to ELL, or English Language Learners. Compared to the U.S. average, the state of Arizona sees a large majority of non-English speaking students. One might think that Spanish being the prominent language to consider, there are actually on average 4 more that are present as well. These include Navajo, Vietnamese, and Arabic. Interestingly, with the 5 major school districts in the Arizona education system that see ELL speakers that are above 1,500, 4 are in the Phoenix metro area, as we mentioned before. To compare with the U.S. average, it is almost impossible, as a majority of school districts have less than 5% of their student population as ELL, compared to more southern states such as Arizona and Texas. Perhaps this can be taken into account that Arizona, Texas, as well as California all border with Mexico. But studies are lacking in that. Spanish, however, is the most prominent language other than English, with 77% of all ELL speakers. So with these staggering numbers, what is an adequate process in which we can assist students to be on level ground or maintain equitability with their peers? Well, a strong approach that has proven successful is something known as Structured English Immersion, or SEI. Structured English Immersion is a system used by the state of Arizona, and it carries with it the goal of exposure through education. What this means is that students do not learn language through identified language courses, but learn the material that is included with their standard curriculum. In essence, they are embedded with their peers. They learn alongside their peers, they use the language with their peers, and for minimal amounts of time, they are pulled out to get more one-on-one accommodations to further learn the language. In addition to these modified courses, they gain one-on-one time, as we said, with aides, and essentially learn through doing. So there's gaps that are filled in, but for a majority of their time learning in the classroom, they are learning alongside their peers. The goal, as studies have shown, is faster language absorption and comprehension. This is the gold standard and process that is preferred with many ELL learners, as well as administration and staff. In contrast to SEI, or Structured English Immersion, Sheltered English is a more balanced approach to English language development, with emphasis on a 50-50 approach to understanding the language and sharing academic course time. Students are allowed to use their native language more frequently as well. So in contrast to structured English immersion, sheltered English is a more refined and constructed English program that brings in more one-on-one time versus immersion where it is learned as you go along. These courses for both sheltered English immersion as well as structured English immersion and sheltered English are created with the ELL learner in mind. But the goal for both, obviously, is to balance English and academic proficiency. The great thing about these programs is that you can fluctuate with the amount of immersion and coursework as well as accommodating one-on-one time to help the student move along or maintain at pace with their peers. Again, with the goal to make it as equitable as possible. As we've discussed and have shown, the SEI, or Structured English Immersion program, has proven valuable in development of ELL students. But what maintains the effectiveness of SEI are the components involved. These are listed here. These research-based models were adopted in 2019 by the Arizona State Education Department, and the models depend on the intensity of the student need and where they are in their development. In brief, these are, as such, the newcomer model, which is exactly that, a system to integrate and rapidly begin language development for students who are refugees or newly enrolled that have no English background. Then, there's the pull-out method, which is made for students that need routine immersion courses and lessons. The state of Arizona states that at least 60 minutes per day, or 300 minutes per week, or 50 minutes per day, or 250 minutes per week, the founder for elementary and the latter for secondary, of language instruction within the integrated setting are devoted to this type of development. This model also asks for development and teaching of real-world scenarios, hence the more structured English immersion program. Next, the 2-hour model is explained as such, giving students 2 hours a day to develop their language proficiency. And lastly, very similar to sheltered English, there's the 50-50 model, which requires parent signature and permission, but gives the students lessons that they would normally receive in English immersion in a language other than English. This is a more accommodating and structured program that is paced to the ELL student if they are needing more time in developing their enunciation and potentially phonetics when it comes to the English language. However, each of these models are developed to instruct and further assess students in strengthening their English fluency. So as we've discussed through the presentation, and we now understand, the SEI, or Structured English Immersion program, is the current gold standard. And we've taken a deeper look into the components of SEI. But the question presents as to how we are to build on that standard. Well, Arizona has developed a process that addresses the need of a proper English development program that gives each educator the ownership and responsibility in integrating the ELL's needs into their curriculum. The process is known as the Arizona Language Development Approach and is broken into 4 principles that address what expectations look like in the classroom, much like PBIS, with positive reinforcement and an integrated reiteration. This process for integrated language into the curriculum for adequate immersion, consistent feedback, and monitoring, and then further targeted instruction can be modified for each student. This approach creates a scaffolded teaching dynamic that takes each student's needs and modifies it to their level of comprehension, all the while keeping them in the classroom to allow for that structured immersion. Further examples of each category in the diagram are as such. asset behaviors, creating community, and allowing for students to show mastery and helping students find their zone of proximal development. Integrated instruction is developing and creating models that build learning approaches so students have a greater understanding of the curriculum and process. Then providing choices and open-ended opportunities. The third, or for targeted and explicit language instruction, this utilizes language supports and encourages independent learning to better develop what's called student agency, something we will discuss further later. And lastly, monitoring and feedback, which utilize Arizona standards to build instruction, use appropriate summative and formative assessments to monitor progress, communicate openly with families for a more detailed understanding of student needs, consistently provide timely feedback, and lastly, allows for reteach and appropriate remediations. So student agency. Well, in the previous slide, as we discussed, the Arizona language development approach, we use that term, student agency. What is it and how does it apply exactly to language development? Well, student agency in education means to give students an active role in their learning by giving them voice and choice, fostering self-direction, and encouraging them to take ownership of their learning journey. It's not so much a teacher simply teaching a student, but a student wanting to learn as well. For any student to begin immersion, they must be first deemed eligible to begin receiving accommodations and lessons. These eligibility steps are identified through the state agency and education department or school district and is a two-step process, at least for the state of Arizona. The first is being what is known as the HLS or Home Language Survey. It is filled out by a parent or guardian when the student enrolls in the student's school, and it asks basic questions such as language used at home. A parent or a school official may also request that a survey be filled out if not done initially. The second of these is known as the AZELLA, the Arizona Language Learner Assessment, and it is being conducted following the HLS. This is then conducted annually to determine the student's level of proficiency. Initially, it is conducted to decide what placement the student would most benefit from. This is a standard assessment, and it is kept as a record for data keeping. This follows in accordance with both state and federal education guidelines. These are standard accommodations that qualify to take the AZELLA and after taking the HLS. Again, the goal of these tests is to determine what best program or placement the student can thrive in. Then accommodations are placed to help ensure that that student is able to thrive. Once approved, the accommodations that can be implemented are such things as extended time on assignments, repeat directions or written directions in native language, if appropriate. Again, those are normally done with parent permission. Frequent breaks, or known as brain breaks. Preferred seating and group work if you're doing something such as SEI, as we've talked about, to give that student a more immersed approach and experience with their peers. And then 50-50 or individual one-on-one time. Again, these are all accommodations that can be removed or placed following the student's initial assessments and placement. At the beginning of the program, we talked about rights and responsibilities, and one thing that really needs to be focused on is parents' right of refusal. So following assessments, parents and guardians are informed of their rights and responsibilities, such as the program available to that student, which again depends on the state and ELL needs, any tutoring options that may be available, or outside services that do not work directly within the school district but are contracted through the school district. Before mentioned accommodations, which we saw on the previous slide, constant and routine communication and collaborative process with the parents to give teachers and administrators a better understanding of the students' needs and where they are at home. Entry and exit goals, if any exist. Again, more buy-in with the student and the family. And most importantly, parent right of refusal. In a joint release by the Department of Education and the Department of Justice, it is known that parents are entitled to be informed, again, of all available services. And again, state services will vary, each in depth, but the focus is on availability and knowing their options. Parents always hold that right of refusal. And really what that is that parent has the ability to say, this isn't what they feel is right for their student. If that in fact does happen, and a parent signs a right of refusal, essentially the administrators, staff, and families go back to the drawing board to find accommodations that truly will work for their student. Again, the goal is to make it as equitable as possible for that student and to ensure that no student is forgotten. So even though the accommodations that are present may not be what is the best option according to the parents, other options will be researched and made available to continue that equitability. So I want to thank you, everybody again, for attending today's professional development on ELL and Arizona's programs. I hope that this professional development has given you a better understanding of the processes, goals, and appropriate steps to ensure that we are giving every student and all students the same equitable opportunity to thrive. That was the goal here today. It is important to know that resources are available and how our responsibilities as teachers can greatly affect the decisions of parents of ELL students. So let's continue to develop, refine, and pursue the greater good. Thank you. For further resources, and thank you again.